Hi, Central Bears. It's Mrs. Katz. The assignment today is called My Part of the Story, Exploring Identity in the U.S. This entire lesson will be on this one Google form. I'm going to read the instructions to you, and I will also read the passage, but you need to take care of the questions and, of course, the answers. So here goes. The essential question: how does each person's story contribute to the larger narrative of United States history? Overview. The goal of this lesson is to encourage you to examine why it's important to consider individual identities. No two people are alike. The United States has long been considered a melting pot, which is defined as a place where different people or different cultures all come together and begin to merge and mix. In addition, the United States is the product of a multitude of individual perspectives, voices, and choices. After reading the following passage, be prepared to answer questions regarding the meaning of the story. Additionally, you will reflect on your own identity in the stories about how you and your family arrived at this moment in this place. By doing so, you can then begin to understand how the power of your voice and your personal stories can not only have an effect on your friends, family, and community, but also the identity and history of the United States. So let's move on to the passage. In this text, journalist Maria Hinosa describes how she learned from her mother to find and use her voice even when she feels powerless. Hinosa begins the reading by noting that having a coming to America story is a universal experience, even for non-immigrants, since everyone has a story about how they arrived in their present life and circumstances. In 2010, Hinosa shared her Coming to America story in the foreword of a book of writing by Boston High School students. Hinosa wrote, "We all have a coming to America story. Whether you were brought to this country as a baby immigrant like me, or whether you were born in South Boston, we all have a story of how we got to this here. When I was almost 2 years old, my mom traveled from Mexico by plane with me and my 2 older brothers and sister. We were on our way to meet my dad, who had already moved to Chicago. We would live there first and then make our way to Brookline. But on this day, we had to pass the immigration checkpoint at the Dallas airport before we made our connection to Chicago. The super tall Texan immigration agent with the super thick accent towered over my 5-foot-tall mom, who had a very thick accent, a Mexican one. The agent inspected all of our green cards, looked at my mom, the 4 kids up and down, and apparently sideways, and then he bellowed out an order. "You are welcome to come into this country," he said, his drawl lingering. But then he looked at me. "Everyone but the little baby. I can see a rash on her skin, and she will have to stay in quarantine." My mom didn't feel very powerful as she was being looked down upon in order to leave her baby behind in a new country. But she reached deep down inside and found her power in her gut and puffed up all 5 feetness of her tiny body as tall as she could. And then, as if a volcano erupted inside of her, she found her voice. She trusted her voice, and she looked up at the agent and said, "No, sir, I will not leave my daughter here with you. She is coming with me. She is not sick, and I will not leave without her. Do you hear me? I will not leave her here." The tall Texan suddenly felt very small next to my mother's big and powerful voice. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You can all come in. I am sorry." Ever since I heard my Coming to America story, I have used it as inspiration to find my own gut, my own power, my own voice when I feel powerless. If Mom could do that almost 50 years ago, tiny and accented in a new country, I can surely find my voice when I feel tiny and unheard and powerless. Sometimes when you feel invisible, it's easy to feel voiceless. And when you feel voiceless, then you learn how to not use your voice. But when you don't use your voice, you don't hear yourself. And when you don't hear yourself, it's hard to trust who you are. But with my coming to America story, my mom showed me that words are power. Your voice is your instrument, whether you speak with an accent or not, write, sing, or shout. It can be a literal sound, or it can be your voice on a piece of paper or a computer screen. But it is yours, and it comes from your gut. So maybe you should trust it. I remember thinking, because I was a bit different, no one else saw the world like I did. I was a Mexican immigrant kid growing up on the south side of Chicago. There weren't a lot of other kids like me. I did feel different. I felt small. At times I felt voiceless. I thought I was the only student who felt powerless and not part of the real America. I know now that that wasn't the case. I know now that many kids felt different because we just didn't talk about this. Ever. Now you answer the questions as best you can and make sure that you hit submit at the bottom of the form.